My name is Tanmay and I'm part of the developer community team. During the webinar today, learn what is new in Quantum V9 that enables faster delivery and smarter multi-experience solutions. Our experts today, Matt Trevathan, Vice President Product Management, Faizan Khalidi, Senior Director Product Management, and we have Matt Terry as well, Senior Vice President Product Management, to take the session today, and they're going to discuss the V9 features in detail. We also have Abhijit and Jagan from product teams who will take the sessions, and will also take care of the Q&A panel. So before we start the presentation, there are a few things that you need to know. Make sure that you use the Q&A panel for your questions. Do not use the chat panel. We have experts monitoring the Q&A panel, so put your questions over there and you will get answers as soon as possible. Also, make sure that if you have your questions ready, you can start putting it in the Q&A panel. Do not wait at the end of the webinar. You can keep on putting in the Q&A panel and we'll answer your questions. So let me invite Matt Terry to start the session. Matt Terry, over to you. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks, Tanmay. And thanks everyone for joining. I'm going to kick this off and go through the first part of our presentation, and then Faizan and Matt Trevathan are going to help me out a little further down in the presentation with the other topics. I wanted to start off with an overview of the Quantum platform, as I know some folks are new to it, and some of you are veterans of the platform. So this is the high-level architecture of the Quantum platform. If you're not familiar with it, I think most people are pretty familiar with Visualizer, our front-end development tooling, and Fabric, the back-end integration tier. Another big component that underpins all this is our Nitro framework that provides the omni-channel widget library and API that makes it so easy to build these cross-channel applications and reuse as much code as possible. Another big component is DevOps and automated testing, which we'll be covering today as well. So those are the four main components that we'll be covering in the webinar today. But we also have extensive cloud hosting for this solution on both AWS and Azure. So that's an option if you aren't familiar with our product. And then we have a marketplace of reusable assets. So this is the diagram that summarizes overall what the Quantum platform is. And if you're familiar with Temenos's other products, specifically the Infinity products for digital front office, and our the older name DBX, our DBX banking applications, all of those products are built on the Quantum platform. So these features underpin those other products. So what we're talking about today is the enhancements to the Quantum platform that then will bubble up to those products. But other customers that have built custom applications can make use of this immediately. And if you have existing projects, you just need to upgrade to V9. So with that, these are the investment themes of V9 that we're going to go through today around business process and application workflow. Then Matt Trevathan and Faizan will take over and take us through AI integration, next-gen experiences, augmented reality, chatbots, conversational apps. We'll also do some updates on our modern web support, responsive web, the enhancements to our DevOps features, specifically in the area of automated testing. We also have a neat feature around generating applications from data models or object services. We're coining this Quantum Rapid Apps. So it's a way to build really fast applications off of back-end data, and then you can then customize that, regenerate if things change. So we'll walk you through that. And then we have a few slides on the other enhancements that we couldn't quite get to in this webinar. We'll give you a quick summary of what's kind of left over and where you can go to read more about the complete feature set that we're rolling out in V9. So I'll kick it off with our business process and application workflow section. As we looked at how our customers are building applications, business process and being able to configure and manage workflows is a really big component to how they build and manage applications. And when we looked at what customers were asking for, when we talk about workflow or business process, we found that it really falls into three main categories. Some customers were talking about the overall workflow of the application. So we've rolled out a Storyboard where you can see how the application flows, how you go from login to account overview to account details, for example. So that's more of the sitemap or the storyboard of the application, but we still put that in the category of workflow. Then we have client-side workflow and server-side workflow. So client-side workflow is managed in Visualizer on the front end, so you can create how action sequences to how we're going to handle certain events on the client. And then server-side workflow is after we push data to Fabric on the back end, how it's going to process that data. So I'm going to walk you through each one of these, and then I'll show you a demo of how all this comes together. So this is the new Storyboard in Visualizer V9, part of the Quantum platform. It's a new perspective that lets you see your overall application and how the screens connect. And then the orange lines are action sequences or client-side workflows that get you from screen to screen. So you can double click on these and see the logic, see what's going to happen when certain events from these forms are triggered, and then eventually navigate to the other form. So it makes it a really easy way to manage the overall flow of your application. Then when you click on one of those lines, or you're doing some other event handling on the client side, we have an updated client-side workflow editor. So if you're familiar with Visualizer, this is the action editor, the action sequences that you can create. We still have the compact vertical view available to you, but we have a new diagram view that is a little bit more business process based with the symbols of being able to see where the conditional statements are and how the flow is. So it's a really easy way to quickly build these, visualize your client-side workflow, make decisions, and we've added a lot of additional actions in this. So all of your old action sequences will still work in this. We've added more power, and we've added this new perspective to make it a little easier to visualize what's going on in your client-side workflow. And then the third piece is the server-side workflow. So this is a new service inside of Fabric. So if you're familiar with the Fabric console, you have different tabs for each of your services. There's a new tab for workflow where you can go in and build the workflows and decide what happens with data once you submit it into the backend system. And this is all going to execute on that server side. So these are more long-running workflow processes where you can invoke services, you can pause on user tasks and wait for human interaction, you can send emails, make decisions, and control the flow. So one interesting differentiator in our approach to business processes and workflows in the context of building applications is that workflow is tied into our object services feature. So if you're not familiar with our Quantum platform, object services is a way to manage virtual app data models. So you can construct your data model in Fabric, and you can either just store that in the platform using built-in storage, or you map that to your backend system. But the point is that you either discover those objects and import them using our connectors, or you purposely design them, and it helps you build your applications in an MVC type approach. Well, what we've done with workflow is we allow you to associate an object with a workflow and choose which attribute in the object is going to help you drive the workflow. So you submit some data to the back end via an object. The object kicks off a workflow. It starts invoking services, and eventually will stop on a user task. And then some human will open an application, see the objects in that status, they'll take action on them, and that automatically triggers the workflow to keep going, and the workflow validations are automatically run. So it avoids you having to program against the data model and program against the workflow. We keep those things in sync. You can also invoke workflows directly in a traditional way, but we think this is an interesting way to make app development a lot easier and use workflow to drive back-end processes that work very seamlessly with your data model. And then one additional service in Fabric, this is a screenshot of the Fabric console. You'll see the workflow tab, and you'll see the rules tab, which is selected. So we now have a service in Fabric to manage your business rules. So what this allows you to do is go in and create rules in the back end that's going to make certain decisions based on inputs and then give you the prescribed outputs. And this is key because when you are building a workflow, you're going to want to make decisions. And when you act on those decisions, you want the business to be able to configure that logic, right? So all this is going to be tied together in the demo that I show next. So this demo was also used in a recent Forrester webinar where we focused specifically on business process and application workflow. The scenario that we used was a simple pre-approval application. So you're going to go to a bank, you're going to submit an application for a mortgage pre-approval, for example. You're going to provide your personal information, your social security number, so you can do a credit score. So what the workflow does is as soon as you submit your application, we're going to invoke a service to get the credit score. We're then going to create a business rule that says if your credit score is below 600, it's automatically rejected. If it's over 700, it's automatically accepted. And if it's between 600 and 700, we're going to send it to manual review, and a human has to look at it and manually accept or reject it. And then based on the outcome, the email will go out to the user telling them the result. So this is a very simple use case, but it'll illustrate each of the concepts that I just walked you through. So this is Visualizer V9. This is Storyboard. You can see our basic approval application here. You can see us clicking on one of the navigations and opening our new client-side workflow. So this is an example of a workflow that gets kicked off as soon as you try to log into the application. You can see some conditional statements in the client-side workflow, checking to make sure they've put in a username and password or showing them an error. Once we go through that validation, you can see us invoking the login service, and you can see how we're mapping the login user ID and password to the backend service. We're checking that there was a successful response from the service, and then we're navigating to the next form. So this is an example of how you build those client-side workflows to control the logic of the application. Now to get to the form editor that you're used to in Visualizer, you just double-click one of the forms. That'll take you into the full experience to design this form. You can see here the responsive web breakpoints we have in V9 to help you manage your web screens. And the data panel are all your services, and you can launch them directly from there, or you can launch the full Fabric console for this application, which is what we're doing. So this shows you the back-end services for this application. I want to walk you through how we do the Equifax credit score, because this is the first piece of our workflow. So we're building a normal service. In this case, we're just going to do a mock service or a stubbed out service. And to calculate the credit score as a mock service, we're just going to take the social security number they entered, take the last digit, and add 00. So if your social security number ends in an 8, your score is going to be 800. So this is built just like a normal service, but it allows you to quickly stub out services or mock data. So here's an example of being able to test that service, and I'll show you how we're going to incorporate this into our workflow. So if you send in a social security number ending in 8, you'll see your score over on the right is 800. If you send in a social security number that ends in a 7 and do a quick retest, you see that our credit score comes back at 700. All right, because we can't integrate with the full service right now, so we're just going to mock it out to get this data that's going to drive our workflow. Then from a business rules perspective, we want to create a business rule that auto approves or auto rejects the application based on credit score. So this is where we've used an MVL language in this example of the business rule. It's a human readable language. If it's less than 600, you're rejected. If it's between 600 and 700, it's going to go into review. And if it's over 700, it's automatically approved. So this is a simple example of how you can create the business rule based on those inputs, right? And this works like a normal service, so it allows you to go in and test this business rule right inside the console. So here's an example. We'll do a quick test of this rule. It has a 900, which is higher than it's even possible, but it still works. You send in 900, you get approved. You send in 500, do a retest, and you'll see it get rejected. And if you send in 650, for example, it'll go into review. So that's a simple business rule that we're going to use in our workflow to make decisions. So now in our workflow, this is the workflow we've created for this application submission. I'm going to walk you through each one of these tasks so you can understand how workflows are built. So the first entry is when the application gets submitted through object services. So, and then we're going to immediately call the Equifax service. So you can see that we're calling the service and we're taking the social security number from the object that's coming in, and then we get the Equifax response. And we're putting that in the workflow context. So the workflow context is kind of a storage scratch pad for the workflow. And then we send that right into the business rule. So we're taking the Equifax credit score, sending it into the business rule so it can make the decision for us. And we know we're going to get the loan rule response out. This is the full response, everything that the loan rule can return, because it can return more than one thing. Then we want to update the customer object. So remember, this is based on object services. So we're actually taking the loan status, the approve or reject, and we're putting it into the customer object. So if we're mapped into a backend system, that would go into that backend system automatically through the workflow. I don't have to go write any code for that. Then we're doing an exclusive gateway decision. We're looking at what came back in the loan status. And if it's approved, we're going to automatically go to the approved route and send him an email. If the business rule said review it, then we're going to check that in this validation criteria, and we're going to put it in a user task, which will require manual review. And then the other possibility is a reject. So if it gets rejected, we go ahead and send an email. Right? And we've added new functionality where you can create emails right in the workflow editor or as a service, and it supports HTML, so you can make these emails really pretty. We did something really basic for this demo. So if it business rule says in review, we go into this user task. And from the user task, you can only transition out as approve or reject. So the workflow is going to make sure that the user either approves the object or rejects it. You can also add other validation criteria. For example, we could check the user's role and make sure he has the right role to even approve or reject this application. So that's where you put your validations. And then here we're doing another exclusive gateway conditional check to see if he manually approved it or rejected it. And this gives us the ability to send a slightly different email if we want to. Or you could route back to the other email. Okay, so that's a quick flyby of how this workflow is set up. And then I'll go through and show you we'll go through the application submission process real quickly so you can see how this flows through the system. So this is the application we built just to demo this. We're going to log in and submit 2 applications. So this is a user. They're going to go in. They're going to submit a new mortgage application. They're going to provide their customer details. So as soon as they hit continue, this data is being put in that customer object through object services. And the only thing the developer has to do is populate the customer object and commit it to the back end. And then Fabric will take that data and push it into the workflow. So we want to reject this user. So we're putting in a social security number that ends with 3. So the Equifax score is going to come back as 300. The business rule is going to reject it, and the workflow is going to immediately send him an email that says he's rejected. So now the data is submitted. There's no manual intervention required. The workflow automatically runs, and this is an example of the email that we would get from that workflow. And you can style this with full HTML if you want to. So now I want to go through and I want to submit one. This one's for Jack, and we're going to submit a social security number that will put us into manual review, for example. So same thing here. We're putting in the same amount of data. So to get manual review, we have to be between 600 and 700. So we put in a social security number that ends in a 6, which will get us a 600. The business rule will say put him in review, and then we'll go into that user task pending, waiting for a manual person to take a look at it. So I'm going to flip back over to the Fabric console now. So this is more of an ops persona. So I log into the Fabric console, and I'm going to go into the runtime environment and show you the workflow. But this is the overall Fabric console. This is the backend application we're using. This is where the workflow was designed for this specific application, so you can see that here. In the same console, you can go to your environment. So we're looking for our specific Fabric runtime that's executing this workflow, and we can jump into the admin console. So we can jump down to the workflow services. We can find the specific workflow that we've built for this application, and we can see all the different instances of the workflow that's been created. So if we sort and bring the latest workflows to the top, you'll see one of them that completed. This is the one that went through the different chains of the workflow and ended with a reject. So you can see it was rejected automatically, and then it ended. All right, so there's the reject there. If we go back and look at the one that's running, you'll see it followed a slightly different path. It went through and hit the exclusive gateway, and it's stuck on the user task paused, waiting for a review of the application. So this is the runtime. If you want to approve workflows, you would build a different digital experience for whatever the digital back office business users are. So this is just an example of another application we built. It looks at the workflow statuses. It pulls up all of the pending or all the statuses of the workflow and allows someone to then look for any ones that are pending, go into it and approve it. So this could be built however you want to be very extensive. But you can see Jack Smith here. He's still waiting to be approved. We click approved. That releases the workflow, and we'll send the approved email now to Jack. So this is the email he would get now based on that workflow. So this is a picture of the workflow that we ran through, and you can see that last piece of the demo. Because it got stuck in the review application, it was waiting on someone to make a change. So we used that admin application to review the application, and as soon as he hit approved, he simply updated the customer object with loan status equals approved. It moved out of that user task, went through the exclusive gateway automatically, went up through the approved flow, and sent him the email. So that's how all that ties together. Okay, so that rounds out the business process flow capabilities. I'm now going to turn it over to Faizan and Matt Trevathan to cover the next section. Matt will kick us off with some of our new AI integration, and then Faizan will go through some of these other next-gen experience.
So I'm not sure how many people on this phone call are familiar with Temenos's explainable AI. It's our fuzzy logic-based system for mimicking human thought. Explainable AI brings machine learning and automated decision-making to the Temenos platform. And it's primarily used for things like fraud detection, loan processing, tailored pricing, and customer engagement. It also provides some key capabilities for the banking industry. One of the bigger things is auditable rules and governance. But to really make XAI sing, XAI is kind of good at the gray thinking, the stuff that's not black and white. It really needs workflow, and it needs a business rule engine because there are things that are black and white that are handled a lot of times outside of XAI. If you think about Matt's flow just a minute ago, he had a set of hard reject rules. These are things that were very, very easy to understand. What we're going to do is we're going to expand that very, very quickly and show you how to integrate XAI into a workflow. So as you can see, I'm going to come back to the workflow, and just as we've done the Equifax service and added it in, XAI is nothing but a service call. So once I set up the integration point between XAI and our workflow, I can then access it just like I would access any of my other integration services. So what's going to end up happening in my workflow is I'm going to come in through Equifax. I'm going to call XAI. XAI is going to run some deep learning. It's going to take all the data that it has learned about people, take that Equifax report, and then give its own special type of credit score and rating. And then based off that rating and our hard reject rules, it's going to come through and it says, hey, this is a hard reject. This is a soft reject. We need a referral here, or this is an automatic approval. So XAI really augments that flow to help automate some of that area where we would naturally hard reject, or we would naturally approve, and really handles and makes a recommendation on that gray area. So at this point, I'm going to hand this back off to Faizan.
Okay, so you've seen how XAI was integrated with the Quantum platform. Now, apart from that, what we did with V9 is that we have added what we call Quantum IQ. Now, Quantum IQ is an AI-powered developer assistant to simplify and accelerate app development within the Quantum platform. It combines the Quantum AI Devkit and a chatbot framework to enhance developer productivity with things like feature discovery, product enablement, product recommendations, automation of tedious and routine tasks, and basically validation of the quality, performance, and best practices within an application that the user is working on. Quantum IQ uses cutting-edge technologies like machine learning, natural language processing, deep learning, and cognitive services, and it simplifies the discoverability of the product features and for not just new users, but even for experienced users to reduce the overall learning curve and increase the feature awareness within the product. It also provides a single information access point across Basecamp, Marketplace, and the Fabric backend. So let's see how this works. So here I have a quick demo of a couple of use cases with the Quantum IQ. Now, what I'm doing here first is I'm designing a new screen with a few widgets, and what you see is based on the based on the UI that I'm designing on this on my visualizer canvas, Quantum IQ starts recommending some patterns to me, right? So it recommends existing UI patterns within the application, within components within the application, or UI patterns from our Quantum Marketplace as well, right? So in this particular case, we click on one of the UI patterns that I like on the Quantum Marketplace, where I can go in and view all the details of this specific, component on the marketplace. And then I go in and import this component to my collection library to reuse within my project. And once I add that, I can just drag and drop it on my canvas, and I'm ready to go with the pattern from the Quantum Marketplace. Here is another similar example, right? So I've added a couple of widgets on the visualizer canvas, and all of these widgets are vertically stacked, sorry. And when it sees this vertically stacked pattern, it starts recognizing that, and it starts giving me recommendations on how I can update my UI, right? So it just doesn't do it once, but it's a live refresh of recommendations as the designs change. So that was just one example. Now, another example of how Quantum IQ can help us is by identifying duplicate UI patterns within an application. So if I ask Quantum IQ to identify duplicates within my app, within my project, basically it's going to identify all duplicates that it can across all my forms I'm using across my different platforms, right? So it could be, the web versus native versus, the tablet platforms, right? So it could be all of these different platforms, and it goes in and identifies the duplicate patterns and gives a confidence factor for each of the recommendations that it makes. So this is one of the use cases, a couple of use cases from Quantum IQ, which help with, the developer enablement and productivity. But what it also does is it automates a lot of the tedious and routine tasks that you do. One of those examples is, translation of applications. So if you're working with a typical application that's used in a lot of different regions, you would have to ensure that the application is translated for all the different languages. And you do that today using the IATM keys, the internationalization keys available within the Quantum platform, and then, add all the keys and labels within that. What we've done is we've automated that entire process. So if I go to Quantum IQ and ask it to translate my application, you can see how I'm conversing with it, and it checks what language I want to translate. And here I say Italian, and then it starts translating. So what it's doing here is it's making use of the Google Translation Service, and it's translating all these static strings across the JavaScript code. It's translating all the text that I've used on my widgets within the application UI, and it's also translating everything that's in the IATM keys, right? So if you notice on the screen, everything with not just within the UI canvas, but also within the JavaScript code gets translated. Now, if I go to my internationalization configuration through my settings, I'll see that all of these have been added to what I already had with the other, to all the other translations that I had with all the other different languages. So Quantum IQ not just provides integration with, some like the Google Translation Service, but it also has integration with, several other backend endpoints and components like, YouTube Player for playing videos for enablement. It connects with the Quantum Marketplace, like you have seen. It connects with the Quantum Basecamp to answer your questions and to find, similar questions that that users have already answered. And it uses an underlying NLP engine to do this, right? And like we discussed, what it also does is it works with the Quantum AI Devkit. As part of this Quantum AI Devkit, not only do we have the Quantum IQ, but we have support for conversational chatbot frameworks as well, right? So what this conversational chatbot framework does is it allows you to plug and play with different NLP engines. It contains, this particular framework contains NLP connector that allows you to connect with different chatbot frameworks and NLP engines like Amazon Lex, Microsoft Louise, Dialogflow, and BitAI. So the framework contains a lot of properties, APIs that can be configured to connect with the underlying NLP technology, right? So you can use this particular chatbot framework to build easier, faster, and more cost-effective applications with conversational interfaces, and make these applications more personalized and engaging for your customers, partners, and employees. So let's look at a quick demo of how this is done. So here's the demo. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into Quantum IQ, and I'm going to check if there is a chatbot component that's available for me in the marketplace that I can use. So I check for a chatbot component. It comes back with a set of results, and my chatbot framework is the first result that I get. So I go into the marketplace, and I can look at all the details around this chatbot framework. So what I can see here is like it has a bunch of documentation on how to use this chatbot framework along with Quantum IQ, along with the Quantum platform. And as you may have noticed, there's a Quantum, this chatbot framework is available with all the different channels like the web as well as the native channel. So what I've done is I've downloaded this particular component from the marketplace, and I am going to add this component into one of my existing web pages over here. So I've dragged and dropped it and added it at a specific location within the web page. Now, let's go and see how we can edit this component and, where the business logic of the component is written, right? So I can go into the specific component, I can see the properties, I can see the business logic. And if I go into the Fabric, endpoints that are connecting to these components, you can see that in this particular JavaScript, the JavaScript code that I have here, I can configure all the properties and APIs that are configured to connect to the different underlying NLP engines, right? So that's done. So let's come back to Visualizer, and here I'll add the rest of the connections between my chatbot and the link to the interaction between the button that enables the chatbot or makes the chatbot visible. So that's done that. And let's quickly try this out on the live preview. So I click on the help button at the top, and you see that the chatbot at the bottom is visible now. I start that, and I can start interacting with the chatbot, right? So one of the things you will notice over here is I'm interacting with a chatbot, through text, right? Through textual questions and through textual requests. So this is also available through voice-based requests, and that's what we'll see in a couple of minutes on the native platform, right? So this is how it works on the web platform. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my project and use the same component on my native application, right? So this is, I'll close the web forms. I'll go to the mobile forms here, and and I'll open the form where I want to add this particular chatbot interaction on my native mobile form. So once I do that, I drag and drop it, add it to the specific form that I want then. I want the chatbot in, and yeah, I will go ahead and add the interactions that enables chatbot, and let's do a live preview of that. So now I'm doing a live preview connected to the Quantum app that's available in the native marketplaces, right? So like the iOS App Store and the Android marketplace. So now we'll use voice to interact with this chatbot on the native side.
Hi.
Hi, how can I help you?
Will Acme Realtor affect my credit?
Your application may have a minor effect on your credit score, lowering it by 3 to 5 points or fewer. Checking your credit is a necessary step for getting a mortgage. It allows us to show you real mortgage solutions, interest rates, and get you approved.
What would be my monthly expenses for a home worth $500,000, assuming a 20% down payment?
What would be your loan program?
So something that you have observed here in this interaction is that the interaction is not just, a set of FAQs or, a set of questions and answers being answered by a chatbot, but, the chatbot also converses in a context-specific way, right? So it has the context of what we're doing, and it responds back with context-specific responses. So all of these intents and all these utterances by the chatbot are configured as part of the NLP engine, and once that's configured, the chatbot responds with the specific responses that it's doing. Okay, so that's about the chatbot. Now, not only the conversational chatbots, and not only is the AI Devkit used as part of the Quantum IQ, but what we have also done as part of V9 is we've added framework APIs to help developers develop AI-based applications within the Quantum platforms, right? So here is an example where we do this. Now, what we're going to do over here is, in this particular use case, we are going to use image classification APIs that we have introduced, and an ML camera, a machine learning-based camera widget that we have introduced within the Quantum V9 platform. Now, what this will do is it will, this is the use case where a user submits his document, and this document is verified by the camera, and once it's verified, it ensures that the submitted documentation, the submitted document, in this particular case, a license of the user, is a valid ID or not, right? So we have integrated with the camera widget. We have integrated with the image classification APIs as well. So let me go in and click on the camera icon over here. Now, as soon as I click on the camera icon over here, what you notice is that it starts scanning the document that I have submitted, right? So it starts scanning this card, and it provides a confidence level on the validity of the card. Now, what we have trained the model, the AI model over here to do is identify if this card has a proper user identification in terms of the user's picture and certain words like the first name and the last name and those kinds of things. And here the model quickly identifies if the card that's being displayed has those certain characters, and gives a confidence level based on how it classifies that particular image. And once that image is classified based on the confidence level that we gain back, what we do is, we can take different actions, like being able to accept the card or reject the specific ID card that the user has provided. So there are a bunch of things that are happening behind the scenes here. So the new Quantum Framework APIs that we have added for AI and ML, these are an abstraction for iOS and Android, and these are abstracted above the underlying native iOS Core ML and Android ML frameworks. And what we have done here is we've trained the model with a set of images. And, for training the model, we use, the native tools. Like for iOS, we use the Create ML tool for training. For Android, we use TensorFlow. And we've trained the model, and then that trained model has been integrated with the application. And then the APIs that have been exposed by the platform are now, using that model to, classify what kind of image this is. So a sample application for image classification is provided as part of Visualizer. So if you go to the Visualizer sample apps, you will find a sample application that you can use and you can play with, and you can learn how to use this new set of APIs from the framework. So that's all we have with the AI Devkit today. The next thing that we are going to look at is an example of how augmented reality based framework has been integrated with the Quantum V9 platform. So what we did is, again, as part of the Quantum V9 platform, we have added widgets and APIs to enable augmented reality use cases within the framework. So I think if you have done this before, you are used to downloading these NFIs for augmented reality for these native platforms, and then writing that native code for basically integrating your augmented reality use cases. So what we did with V9 is we have again provided a set of APIs within Visualizer and within the Visualizer framework, and those APIs can be used to create augmented reality use cases. Like we'll see in a second how we are using AR in this particular use case, and this is used again in a very realtor based application scenario. So here what we do is we point the device camera towards houses that are available for sale, right? And once I do that, based on my location-based preferences, and based on my geolocation, and based on my directions that the camera is facing, so it looks at a lot of parameters, and it lays out an augmented reality based set of components in front of the house that I'm viewing, right? So in this particular case, there was a video of the interiors of the house, as well as the details of the specific property as well. So apart from AI and AR capabilities, what we have also done is we have added the support for conversational applications within the platform. And so these are basically your voice-enabled virtual assistants that we're talking about, like Amazon Alexa, like Google Home, like the Apple HomePod speakers, and things like that, right? So, you've seen how these voice-enabled speakers have become popular across different use cases in the last few years, right? So this is a quick architecture of how things work. So when you, so in a specific case like Alexa, when you start interacting with Alexa and you request something, or you ask a specific question, or you start a conversation with Alexa, what it does is it takes that request all the way to the Alexa service platform, and which is then redirected to the Fabric runtime. And this could be redirected for a few reasons, right? It could be to authenticate the user who is trying to interact and use a specific Alexa skill, or it could be to request for some virtual assistance based on some virtual assistant components, or it could be to connect to an back-end endpoint and get back a response that is served to the user, right? So let's see how this is done. So let's look at a demo, right? So again, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to check with the Quantum IQ If there is there is a marketplace component for Alexa in this particular case, I can directly also go to the marketplace from the marketplace menu at the top, and that's what I've done. And I've added components to this particular project. And what I'm doing right now with this component is it comes with authentication web application out of the box. Now I've taken that authentication Alexa authentication web application, and I'm updating it according to my my app branding guidelines. And I'll integrate this particular web application with my existing identity service that I've been using for my native web applications. So now that I've integrated this with the identity service, what I would want is when a user interacts with Alexa for this specific skill, I want the user to be authenticated using this particular web application, right? So that's the entire use case we are trying to accomplish over here. So I'm going in and using the client-side workflow. I wired up all the different interactions for my authentication. Okay, so it looks like my my business logic for authenticating this user using the existing identity service is ready. I'll go ahead and build and publish this web application. And that's done. So the web application is published. Now what I do is I go to the Alexa developer console. Here I can see the intents, I can see the endpoints that have been configured, and most importantly, I can see the authorization URL, which is pointing to the same web application that we have used here. Now I'll go to the Amazon Alexa companion app, and here I'll search for my specific skill. And once I search for that specific skill, I'll enable the skill. So let me enable the skill and start interacting with Alexa.
Alexa, open Acme Realtor.
Hello, welcome to Acme Realtor. You can ask me questions like application status.
What is the status of my application?
Sorry, you must authorize before using Acme Realtor services. Please use the Alexa app to link your Amazon account with your Acme Realtor account.
So you see what happened over there is that I enabled the skill, but I did not link my account for this particular skill, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into my companion app and now link it to my account. And once I do that, it asks me to authenticate against that identity service. And once that's done, I can come back to Alexa and try this again.
Alexa, open Acme Realtor.
Hello, welcome to Acme Realtor. You can ask me questions like application status.
What is the status of my application?
Your application number 043 submitted on March 4th, 2020 has a status in progress.
How long does it take for a pre-approval?
At Acme Realtor, the pre-approval process takes between 7 to 10 days. The pre-approval duration can depend on the type of loan and the credit rating.
So what you've seen is that when we enable the skill and did not link the account, it stopped the user from going ahead because the user wasn't authenticated. And then in the next scenario, we went ahead and linked the account. And as soon as we linked the account, what happened is it redirected back to our web page that we created for authenticating the user, and the user goes in there and adds his username and password, authenticates through that web application, and then is redirected back, to the Alexa companion app to enable the skill, right? And that's how you can then use Alexa with an authenticated user. So that was an example of how you would enable, these virtual or voice-based assistants and integrate them with the quantum platform. Okay, so that's all on the AI experiences and the next generation enhancements that we have done with the quantum platform with V9. Now, the next section talks about the modern web experiences and the responsive web enhancements that we have made as part of V9. So we have made a bunch of enhancements, and we keep making in the last few years. We have double down on the investments and the enhancements that we have made in in the web experience within the Quantum platform. So a few top features that we have added in V9 are the support for the responsive components, support for a web, what we call a web component wrapper. So this basically allows you to, integrate with any of the web libraries, existing, non-quantum web libraries, third-party web libraries that are available in abundance out there. So we can we can integrate with that, and then we have a bunch of PWA enhancements, architectural changes, and performance enhancements that we'll talk about. So let's start with the demo of the responsive components. What you see here is I already have a form designed in the canvas, which is responsive, and it has three responsive breakpoints at the top, right? So what we can do now is I'll go in and create a component, and you can create a component without a contract, or you can even create a component with a contract. And what's going to happen once you create this component now is that it is going to carry over the responsive breakpoint properties that have been enabled for that specific form to the component as well. So I have the component now in my component library over here. Now what I'll do is I'll go to a new form, and I'll insert this component onto the new form. And once I insert this component onto the new form, you'll notice that the breakpoints automatically get added to the specific form as well. So now if I go back to the breakpoints and move between the different breakpoints, you will notice that the form already is carrying all the responsive breakpoint properties that were used when I created this particular component as well. So you can not only create a component and have it within your project, but of course you can share it across projects as well, right? So these responsive components can be added to your collection library, like I'm doing over here. And this collection library is of course available all across your workspace, or it can also be exported and used in different projects as well. So from this collection library, I can go in and then, drag and drop the same component onto a form, and then you see that it still holds on to all the responsive breakpoints that we have added, all the responsive breakpoint properties that we have added for this specific component. So this is not only for, the components without contract, but this is supported for collections, as well as this is supported for components with contract as well. Another feature that we talked about is the ability to integrate with a third-party web library, right? So in this particular case, what I'm doing is I'm going to Material UI, which is a very commonly used third-party web library. I go in and I'm using a table-based layout where I can sort, I can search, and I can do pagination within that specific table that Material UI provides out as a box. So what I do is I go in and download this particular, component, the web component. And once I download this particular component, I'll copy this specific example of the table over here, which is called Enhancements UI table. That's the example that Material UI provides. I'll go and copy that onto within my project, right? So right now what I'm doing is I'm just adding the dependencies that are associated with this particular library, right? So the library had a bunch of instructions for downloading the NPM-based dependencies for this particular library. So I did that. My library is now ready. I can then go into my edit menu and click on Manage Web Libraries. Here, I'll give a name to my, this widget or a component that I'm going to create. So this can be created as a widget, and it can be added to your widget library, or it can be created as a reusable component where you can define your own set of properties, right? So I've selected the web library over here in the wizard, and now I'm going to set my properties. It comes with its own set of default properties. So the framework, provides a set of default properties, and then you can add your own custom properties. So I've added a couple of custom properties to this particular component that I'm creating. And then once I create these properties and generate this, component, it auto-generates, my helper methods for me, right? So it auto-generated this initialize widget method, it auto-generated the model change method, and here I'll just go in and add this parent node to my table. Once I do that, this component is now ready. So I'll go in and add the component to my form. Go in and insert this into my form, and then I'll use the live preview to preview the component. So I'm now going into the live preview, and I am building this application for responsive web. So this is supported for responsive web as well as the SPA platforms, and that's where you saw that when we started, it showed the mobile mobile UI on the component, and then we switched to the web UI. So now you can see the output of this component on my live preview. I can go in and I can interact, and I can use this web component as I would do, right? So you have all these options of pagination, the sorting, different number of rows per page, and things like that. So you can do a lot of different things with these with this component now, right? One of the things that I've done is I've added this component more than once within my web page, right? So I'm using it twice within the web page. And the next thing that you will notice is I have a bunch of non-web library-based widgets, right? So these are the quantum widgets that I'm using for, the switch and for the list box for rows per page, and using those widgets from outside the web library and controlling the web library itself. Right, so you can do that as well. So you can have you can do a mix and match of your, visualizer widgets and APIs along with the web library, and then you can map those, and they can interact with each other as well. Okay, so the next feature we're going to talk about are the PWA enhancements, right? So we had introduced progressive web apps support over the last couple of years, and we have seen a lot of interest and a lot of usage by our customers. Now, one of the requests by our customers was that what we do today is we provide support for service workers out of the box, right? So what that means is we auto-generate these service workers. So some of these users, some of the advanced users wanted to extend these service workers and wanted to add their own service worker capabilities within their applications as well. So with V9, we have provided a capability where you can replace the service worker file, or you can extend the service worker file using a service worker helper, right? So once you write your service worker code, you can go in and extend your service worker, or replace the service worker itself. Okay, so apart from all of these features, we have a bunch of additional web enhancements that we have made in the V9 platform. Things like we've added a fundamental architectural change where we are using CSS-based layout engine, and we've moved away from a JavaScript-based layout engine to standardize on the web frameworks. We have done a bunch of web optimizations for optimizing the underlying DOM that gets generated, as well as provided a protected mode capability with web obfuscation as well. So what this protected mode does is it's very similar to if you are familiar with protected modes and used it with our native platforms. It's very similar process, and it uses the same library for production, and it obfuscates the web output using this protected mode. So this can be enabled using built-time hooks within your project, and it can be enabled to obfuscate your web application. Apart from that, there are a bunch of other enhancements, like a lot of widgets and API enhancements, support for new images and things like that. Okay. So with that, I'll pass it on to Matt Drayton for the next section.
So we're going to cover three things here. We're going to cover developer collaboration, what happens when I start putting things into my repository, and some new features in testing. We already had inside of what we call App Factory, which is our DevOps tooling, support for Selenium and Appium using TestNG, but we've decided to move testing left and shifted a little bit more left, and I'll talk about that and how to get engaged in testing a lot sooner in the software lifecycle using our test recorder and our test automation. So the first new feature that we have is our collaboration feature. We get many requests from our clients, hey, what if someone's working on something and we don't want them to work on it on the same form at the same time because there's going to be some overlap and we need to be able to collaborate with each other, even though, I'm going to slow this down, even though we might not be sitting next to each other. So what's happening here is Satya is checking a few things, pulling down his Git, and then he does a quick refresh. He's enabling operation server. Now in this case, it's his local host, and he's going to tie it into his master branch. Now over here, Mona's going to do the same thing. She's going to enable collaboration, but point to Satya's server, which is 10.10.41. something, and now they can start collaborating. So as Satya starts working on a form, you could see here that everything looks good. Mona and Satya are not working across the same form. He starts dragging some buttons. He looks again, still looks good. But Mona, on the other hand, comes over here and on the same form starts dragging a button in. And at this point, it says, hey, looks, you get a little thing from IQ that says, looks like Satya is working on the same stuff. So Satya can come over and he gets a little warning too. If you notice in that lower left-hand corner, little collaboration warning. It looks like Mona and him are working on the same stuff. He'll check his things into Git. Then Mona can pull his Git changes down, synchronize them with her changes, and now they're synchronized. So very early on, rather than waiting to the end of the day and merging a lot of stuff, they can quickly see that they're working over each other and either manage their merges left and right like what they're doing now, or continue on and one person work on one form and one person work on the other form. We've done a lot of work in automated testing. We've moved into thinking about how we do testing today. Selenium and Appium with TestNG are really Java-based. There are a lot of Java-based testing frameworks out there. A lot of our teams work within JavaScript, and we needed a way to get testing involved earlier. What we've done is we've built a testing recorder built into Visualizer, and we're trying to make that more of a seamless experience so that developers can start testing at the same point that we would think of testers coming in and starting their tests. So more and more testing becomes part of the check-in process, becomes very easy to do, and then becomes part of the automated process. So you've got a quality check to make sure that your developers are doing checking their tests before they're checking in. So what you're going to see here, this is a web example. We do web and we can do a responsive web, excuse me, and this is a mobile sample. We're going to create a test case real quick with our local device. So on the right, what you see is we're physically connected to a local device. And what I'm going to do is as I press things on the right and do click actions, you can see I'm recording those actions, those key swipes, key presses, and then I'm going to do a real quick check to make sure I put the right data in. So I do an assertion, and all that is saying I want to make sure what's in that text box is mattterry@timonos.com. Once that's done, I'm going to add a click to that login button in a quick wait state, and I'll be done creating my first test case. It was that easy. So anything that I click, anything that I touch, I can, with the test recorder, go ahead and start building a test case around. Now, I can also build manual test cases with this, not part of the demo, but anything that you see built in the test recorder, you can manually edit also. So I'm gonna make a couple more tests throughout this. I went a little bit too quickly. I'm gonna make a second and third test. The second test is going to go through the flow of approving an application, which you see here. And I'm checking a couple labels on the field. And when this is done, I'll again go down, click the submit button. Here's the form that I applied for. I put in $50,000. Let me make sure that I put $50,000 in there. Now I could check one of these labels the same way. So I can take a label, check the label text. I could check the text of the commit button. I could check to make sure an image is what it's supposed to be. I hit the submit button and my second test case is done. I'll end up building a third test case that just simply logs out. So I'm going to stop. That test case is complete, and there's a quick replay. As you can see, right from the browser, I'm able to replay that test so that as I'm building the test, I can quickly do a replay. Now I'm going to build that third test, which is a log out. We'll quickly create that test. Now, from this point, I logged out. Now I have 3 test cases. I can combine these test cases together in what we call a test suite. That's a combination of test cases in a sequence. So very quickly, I'm going to rerun all of these together as a test case. So you see it's going to log in. Then it's going to go to the submit case test case. It's going to run what we did, and then it's going to log out. So now I've captured everything about the test case in a test suite. So I can run from beginning from login all the way to the end. And within Visualizer, I can see my last 5 runs, whether it's a single test case or a whole test suite. So that's what you see here, is that now I've seen my results that all 3 of my test cases passed locally, so I can move on to getting my web test. Same thing with web, not gonna go into too much detail. I just wanted y'all to know that everything that we're doing with Jasmine and JavaScript-based testing, we can also do on the web. So I'm quickly going to create a test case here that just logs in and logs out. So you can see that what works on mobile now works on the web. So we can cover all of our channels from Android, iOS, and responsive web. Now what happens when I want to put these together and run these in an automated fashion? I have a test suite called Smoke.js, and I'm going to add it to my Smoke test plan. So just like with my test cases, I just move smokes.js over, and I go into App Factory. And the second that I go into App Factory, I can now run this as part of my build process and physically either run this on a Chrome browser or run this on a physical device. So I'm going to rebuild one of my projects real quick. And before I do that, I want to make sure I have some devices. So I'm going to go into my device farm. I'm going to pick a number of iOS devices and Samsung devices by quickly coming in here and filtering out those devices. Now, this isn't new to App Factory, if you've ever used App Factory with device testing, but a lot of people haven't seen this functionality. So I'm simply going to check some Galaxy, and then I'm going to check some iPhone devices, add those into my device pool, and give the device pool a name. Now, anytime I run my test, I can simply choose the pool from a drop-down of what I want to use. So this is my Samsung iPhone pool. You can see I already have a Samsung pool. I build that pool, and that pool of devices would be used for my testing. So I'm going to create a pool real quick, go back over. Now I'm going to do a build, and this time I'm going to build, so it's actually going to create my binaries. If I create desktop web, it'll deploy it out to the web. I'm going to do a quick rebuild. If you haven't seen App Factory, we can set up a different call for that, but basically this is a multi-channel build engine for iOS, Android, and responsive web. I'm going to leverage the framework, which is Jasmine. You can see I picked my available test pool, which was Samsung in this case, and I'm going to run that smoke.js. Now it's going to go through the build process. It's going to build that Android native application, and then it's going to test it on a live device and send me the results. Now, if you're familiar with App Factory, these results should look pretty familiar. You get a video, you get all of the same Appium log files, because we actually wrap our start of our test in Appium. So since we use AWS Device Farm, you get a video of the whole scenario. In addition, the same reports that you're getting inside of Visualizer, you get for each test that you pass or fail on this. And as you can see, they failed a test here. So we can go through and not only do our testing on on Visualizer locally, but you have the ability every time that you build to perform the same test that you're using on Visualizer. And back off to Faizan.
Okay, so the next section we are going to go through is the support for application generation using the Quantum Rapid Apps. So this is what we call Quantum Rapid Apps. So what we do here is we, support the generation of native and web applications from an app data model, right? So you have an app data model, you take that, and it gets converted to an object service, within Fabric, and using that, we try to generate native and web applications using the Quantum Rapid Apps feature. This is used to generate data and workflow-driven applications from object services. You can create new data models, or you can use existing backend systems to generate these object services. And then once these are generated, you can configure how your UI is generated from these data models, by configuring the data model and configuring which data elements are included and which are not, and things like that. And then finally, you can also make these backend data changes and regenerate the UI without losing the customizations that you have done on the UI, right? So we will see this with three specific demos, right? So there are three demo scenarios that we are going to go through. The first one is just generating the base application. For this, what we're going to do is we're going to import an Excel spreadsheet which already has a data model created within that Excel spreadsheet. And we're going to create an object service out of the spreadsheet and generate a data model. And then we're going to enhance this data model and generate the application UI from it. And then we'll finally preview this using our live preview. So I'll go ahead and I'll first start with a new project within Visualizer. Let's name it the Acme products, right? Once I do that, I go into my data panel and I'll configure a new data storage object, right? So how I do that is I click on the import Excel spreadsheet. Once I click on that, it opens the wizard for me, which takes me through importing an Excel file. I go in and browse for a specific file that's called objects.xls. Take that, and again, the wizard takes me through importing the data model from within that Excel spreadsheet. So it shows me all the objects that are available within the spreadsheet, and I can select which objects I want to generate and which ones I don't. Once I do that, it gets created. It creates a data model for me, and here you can see all the objects. You can see all the fields within these objects, and of course, within the fields, each of these fields have their own properties and things like that. Now what I'll do is I'll go into a specific object over here. So let's we will customize and modify certain fields from this customer's object. So I'll go in, I'll go to the address field, I'll go to the details of the address field, and I can change the properties. Like in this particular case, I'm changing the max length of the address fields to accept 80 characters instead of the 10 characters, right? So I've done that. Now I go back in, I rename my object service over here, and then I save that. Now, once I save this, I've made my changes for all my objects. What I do is I'll come back to Visualizer. I'll go to the data panel, and what you'll notice is this new object service and the new set of objects that we have added in Fabric are all displayed as part of my data panel on the right side. I can right-click on the object service, and it shows me an option to generate forms for all the different channels like mobile, tablet, and desktop. In this scenario, we'll select desktop, and what it's doing is it's generating automatically all the forms for interacting with these objects. Now, these are the forms that get generated are based on the CRUD operations. So you get a form for creating an object, or basically creating one of the rows in an object or one of the elements in an object, and then retrieving from it, updating it, and deleting it, right? And it also creates, since I have multiple objects here, right? Like we have customers, we have orders, we have employees, and we have products. It also creates a menu page for me from where I can interact with all these different objects and navigate between all these different objects. You may have already also noticed that all the navigation between these objects and all the code to make those invoke those services to get and retrieve and create and update and delete these objects is already auto-generated, right? So I go in, I do a live preview, and I can start using this application now. So the first thing I'm doing is I've gone to the products page. I have a create form over there. I've created a specific record, and this particular record is since it's on the desktop, it shows up as a grid, right, where I can see the details of the record, and then I can go in and edit some of the this specific record that I've created as well. I'll do a similar thing with the orders object. And then I can do the similar thing with the employee object as well, right? So I have employees, orders, customers. So you see what got generated is a list page, which is a grid of all the records in my object. And then there's a details page from where I can view the details of each of the records. And then there's a add button, which allows me to add a new record, and then finally there's an update and a delete option, which allows me to update this record or delete the specific record, right? Okay, so this is my first scenario, right? So we've gone in and we have created this base application now. So the next thing that we are going to do is in the next demo, we will customize these generated forms. We will change the order of the fields that got generated in these forms. We can hide, we can show the fields, we can hide the fields, we can change the display names of the fields, we can order the fields. There's a bunch of features that we have added for you to, rapidly update the specific UI that gets generated. We can add new UI elements within the UI that gets generated, right? So you may want to add your own custom UI within the app UI that got generated, and to update the UI look and feel, you can customize the themes and things like that. So let's see how that is done. Okay, so I go into my the base application that got generated. Let's use the details form over here for our UI customization. So I'll first go to the option on the right that says customize my fields, right? So I selected the form, select customize fields. Now here, you'll notice that I can order, or I can basically reorder how these fields within the details form are sorted, right? So I'm moving the phone number field up. I've deleted one of the fields. I've basically hidden one of the fields, and I can add new fields as well. And then I click on regenerate, and that regenerates my UI on the specific details form. The next thing we'll do is we'll add some custom UI elements in between these, right? So all the UI elements that you have seen until now were the generated UI elements. Now I've added this custom label in between because I want to create a section just for, the location details, right? So I've added the location details section here, and once I do that, let's go ahead and view how this customized UI now looks. So I'll go into the customers where we updated the UI, and if I go into the customer details, you'll notice that the phone number field has moved up. The location details section has been added as a custom UI in between my generated UI, right? Okay, so that was the second demo where you can customize the generated UI within Visualizer once you generate that. Now, the last and the last demo is about customizing the data model, right? So you generated an app, customize the UI, and now you customize the data model, and you can add new fields to the data model. You can delete existing fields or update existing fields in the data model, and then regenerate in the application UI without losing any data integration, right? So that's what we'll see in this demo. So I go back to my data panel. I right-click on my object service, click on edit, and I'll start editing one of my objects within the object service, right? So I'm editing this product object over here. I'll add a new field called product weight, and I'll add one more field called product dimensions. So one of the things that this does is, apart from adding these fields, and when the UI generation happens, it also ensures that the The data types that you see, those data types are used to generate the specific UI on your forms, right? So I've added the product weight and the product dimensions. You see those on the data panel now for the products object. I'll go to my UI, and here I'll generate the UI from the Customize Fields button over here. So I select that, and I see that the product weight and the product dimension fields are showing up here now. I add both of these, and then I'll regenerate the UI. So so again, going back to the data, the data types, we can generate things like strings can generate labels, Boolean can generate switches, and dates can generate calendars and things like that. So the platform automatically takes care of doing that conversion as well. Okay, so once that's done, I'm going to my create form now, right? So we have updated the details form. We'll go and update the create form, and on the create form, I'll add these two fields for creation of the specific record with the product weight and the product dimensions. And then similarly, I'll update the list form, which is a grid in desktop, with the same. Again, in this particular case, I'm not using both the fields, but I'm just using one of the fields, and I'm still hiding the product dimensions field on my grid here. So this is, this particular feature for generating these quantum rapid apps is available for both the web as well as the native platform. So you can generate applications for mobile tablets and desktops as well, right? And okay, so we are done with our changes. We have made data model changes, and we have regenerated the UI. Now let's go and see how that works on live preview. So here you can see that for an existing record, I don't have a product weight because this was a newly added, field for my record. But for any new fields that I create, any new records that I create, the product weight gets added. But I can go into my existing records, and then I can update those records with the product weight and the product dimension fields, right? So you see that this particular record doesn't have those specific details. So I'm going ahead and updating that record. And once I update the record, I'll see those being shown as part of my list over here. So that's how you can, update your existing data model, and you can regenerate the objects from that data model, and then all of those regenerated objects and the regenerated fields within those objects show up on your UI as well on the front end. Okay, so we have seen a lot of features today, but we did not have enough time to cover all the features that Quantum V9 provides and all the enhancements that we have added to the Quantum platform within V9. So this is a link to the What's New section in Basecamp. So if you go to basecamp.terminus.com, What's New, you will be able to see additional quantum enhancements that we have not been able to cover today. But what we will do, what I'll do is I will quickly go through, a quick look at what these enhancements are, and then you can go back to the What's New section for further details on these enhancements. So we have a lot of additional visualizer enhancements that we have made, apart from everything that you have seen. So we have made enhancements on visualizer tooling with a simplified project creation wizard, new set of enablement with new hikes and things like that, as well as search capabilities for marketplace components within libraries and things like that. We've also made enhancements to our action editor, where we've added new actions, we've added rename and search capability for actions, and a bunch of other enhancements to the mapping editor and data panel capabilities. We've also added enhancements, of course, to a lot of widgets and APIs within the entire Nitro framework that that visualizer applications use. As well as enhance the overall platform with a lot of performance improvements for project load, refresh and form load, as well as supporting new versions of browsers like the Edge with Chromium and things like that. And with that, I'll give it back to Matt Terry for the other enhancements on the Fabric side.
Thanks, Faizan, and thanks, Matt Trevathan, for your guys' help. So for the Fabric enhancements, this is just a high-level view. The full list is on the What's New page. The link's in the chat of the WebEx or the Zoom. So just a couple highlights here around integration. We're showing a couple of the connectors and enhancements that we put out, Cloudian for file storage. There's a new email connector that we were using in workflow, some enhancements to the database, and allowing to chain multiple Java pre and post processors. Enhancements to object services around bringing in an Excel file, generating the object model, making it easier to create the object, virtual app data model. There's a new enumeration data type, so you can set fields and restrict the values, use combo boxes, and some enhancements around offline objects. There's quite a few security features. One of the big ones from our customer feature request was more granular access in the cloud console. When you go in and control what users can have access to what environments, it used to be kind of an all or nothing admin role per environment. We've now given the ability to go in and grant access to each feature of the cloud environment, so you can get a little more granular there. There's new app key management to be able to separate the keys, primary and secondary keys across native and mobile, which is a good way to separate the traffic. So if you're having a security issue on one, it doesn't affect the others. There's a configuration to control if users can have multiple sessions on an application. You used to have to write a lot of code for that. Now it's a configuration. Quite a bit of enhancements to App Factory and our DevOps services you'll see there, mainly around just upgrading and keeping everything current, around being able to build for the latest and greatest, and being able to run those new automated test scripts that Matt Trevathan showed us. Then a couple other enhancements to call out here. There's a lot of improvements around server-side events. So Fabric is a very event-driven framework. You can now fire events and handle them. So you can have integration services connected to events. You can have integrations fire events asynchronously that other things will handle. Push notifications in our EAS, our Enterprise App Store. Support for the Salesforce SMS Gateway. Better API key management and engagement services. So if you're calling engagement services from a back-end system, the keys used to expire. There's a lot more control now around that. We put analytics in our mobile app that you can find on the app stores. For viewing app previews, you can now run some reports from that app. And then also in our standard reports, there's a lot of additional formats for you to download those reports locally so you can more easily share them. So that's a quick run through of some other things we didn't have time to cover, but visit the What's New page for a full list. And also, if you have your own ideas and feature requests, please go to our developer community, basecamp.temenos.com. There's an ideas section. In this release, we went through quite a few of the ideas and delivered those. There's 2 different slides here of the different ideas. There's a 45 total, so I don't have time to go through these, but it's an example of how our community, our customers, our partners are submitting ideas. We take those very seriously. We work those into the roadmap, and V9 had quite a few of these. If you want to go through and read each one of them, you can visit Basecamp or download the recording of the webinar. So speaking of next steps, this is wrapping up our section. Download V9. It's ready today. You can go to our community portal, basecamp.temenos.com. Go to the download section. You can download Visualizer. If you already have an account on the cloud, you can open the support ticket to upgrade environments to V9. The Fabric on-prem installer will be out next Monday or Tuesday on Basecamp if you want to install that locally. What's New link has been shared, and the webinar recording will be posted. So I want to appreciate everyone's time. The product team will stick around for a little bit on the meeting. If you want to continue to post questions, we'll answer all of those. Otherwise, post questions into Basecamp later. We have a forum there for you. We'll be answering. And with that, I will turn it back over to Tanmay to wrap us up.
All right. Thanks, Matt Terry. Thanks, Matt and Faizan, for taking the session today. It was indeed a good session with a lot of info. I'm sure there's a lot of excitement about the new features added to Quantum V9. I want to thank the entire audience for joining us today. We are going to post the recording on Basecamp very soon. So, the same page from where you registered for the event, same page you will see the recording, and you can share the link with your friends and colleagues. Thanks everyone once again. Stay at home, stay safe, and we are still here for a couple more minutes. If you have questions, use the Q&A panel. If you want to ask your questions later, you can use Basecamp forum and ask questions. We'll tag experts and make sure that you get answers for your questions. Thank you so much for joining the call today. Thank you.